Your grandparents worked one job, bought a house, and retired at 65. You have 3 side hustles and can barely afford rent. This is not about laziness. This is about a system rigged against workers. Corporations destroyed pensions. Wages don't match inflation anymore. The hidden truth about your 401k, it was never designed to save you. Social Security won't save you. Saving isn't enough anymore. In this video, I'll show you exactly how we got here. The financial truth nobody tells you. Stay until the end. Let's begin with your grandfather's first paycheck.
What if I told you your retirement was stolen before you even knew it was gone? Not by a masked criminal, but by men in $1,000 suits on Wall Street, who systematically dismantled the greatest promise ever made to the American working class. This is documented fact, and by the end of this video you'll understand exactly how they pulled it off, and why nobody went to jail. But first, let me show you what they took from you. It's 1985. Your father works at General Motors. 30 years of clocking in, playing by the rules. The deal was simple. Give us your labor, your loyalty, and when you're too old to work, we'll take care of you. A guaranteed pension, security for life. Back then, 62% of American workers had this safety net. It wasn't a fantasy, it was the backbone of the middle class. Today, that number has collapsed to less than 12%. Did these pensions just vanish? Did companies suddenly go broke? That's what they want you to believe. The truth is far more calculated, and it all comes down to one word: risk. Wall Street realized something in the late 1970s. Pension funds represented trillions of dollars, money that could be leveraged, manipulated, and transferred from workers into the accounts of financial elites. But they needed a plan. They needed to convince an entire generation that giving up guaranteed security was actually freedom. Enter the 401k, sold to you as empowerment. Why depend on your company when you can manage your own retirement? Sounds great, except they forgot to mention one detail. They were transferring all the risk onto you. Under the old system, if markets crashed, that was the company's problem. They held the risk. With a 401k, you're holding the bag when everything collapses. Your retirement is now tied to market performance, to fund managers you'll never meet, to an economy rigged for those who already have wealth. And here's the kicker. While your 401k might grow if you're lucky, the real winners are the institutions charging you fees, the banks selling you products, the consultants who convinced your employer to kill the pension. They get paid whether you retire comfortably or die broke. Ever wonder why your parents seemed more secure in retirement than you'll ever be? This is why. The game changed, and they never told you the new rules were designed for you to lose. But what I'm about to show you goes even deeper. Those remaining pension funds, the ones that still exist for teachers, firefighters, public workers, they're not safe either. They've become Wall Street's ultimate target. The industry has a term for it: exit liquidity. That's a fancy way of saying suckers who buy your garbage right before it collapses. And I'm going to show you exactly how they're doing it, and who's getting rich while public workers lose everything. But before we go deeper, I need to ask you something. If what you've heard so far is hitting close to home, if you're feeling that knot in your stomach realizing how this game was rigged, hit the like button right now. Every like tells the algorithm this message matters. The more engagement, the more people see what the financial establishment wants buried in footnotes nobody reads. And while you do that, keep this in mind. What I'm about to show you involves trillions of dollars, and the people who lost it were never told where it went. But first, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me. Did your family live through this? Did you watch your parents lose a pension? Are you sitting on a 401k right now wondering if it'll actually be enough? Maybe you're one of the few still covered by a traditional pension, wondering how long it'll last. Your stories aren't just anecdotes, they're evidence, a collective testimony that can't be dismissed. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This channel exists because I believe the most powerful information is exactly the kind institutions don't want you to have. When you subscribe, you're not just getting notifications. You're joining a community of people who refuse to be played, who understand that financial literacy isn't about balancing your checkbook. It's about understanding the systems designed to keep you broke while others get rich. So subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because what I'm about to reveal, how pension funds became Wall Street's piggy bank for their riskiest bets, how your teacher's retirement got used to prop up junk bonds and toxic assets, makes everything we've covered so far look like the opening act. The real crime isn't that they killed the pension system, it's what they did with the corpse. Let me take you back to a time that might feel like ancient history now, but it wasn't that long ago. Picture America in the 1960s and 70s. A man, let's call him Frank, works on the assembly line at General Motors in Detroit. Every morning at 6, he punches in. Every evening at 3, he punches out. 40 hours a week, sometimes more when overtime's available. The work is hard, repetitive, physically demanding. His hands get calloused, his back aches by Friday, but Frank doesn't complain much because he's got something most workers today can only dream about. Certainty. Not hope, not a maybe, not a financial product with disclaimers in fine print, but actual ironclad certainty about his future. See, Frank has a pension, a defined benefit plan. And here's what that means in plain English. His company has made him a promise. Work here for 30 years, and when you're 65, we will pay you a specific amount every single month until the day you die. Frank knows the exact number. He can calculate it. It's written in his contract. It's not tied to how well the stock market performs. It's not dependent on whether he makes smart investment choices. It's not a gamble. It's a guarantee. The company takes his labor now, and in exchange, they assume all the risk of ensuring he's taken care of later. That's the deal. That's the social contract that built the American middle class. But Frank didn't know this system was already being marked for death. In boardrooms and think tanks, people were already running the numbers, not on how to protect workers like him, but on how much money companies could save if they stopped making these promises altogether. This wasn't some socialist fantasy or government handout. This was capitalism at its most functional. Employers and employees striking a bargain that recognized a simple truth. If you give us the best decades of your life, the least we can do is make sure you don't spend your final years eating cat food and choosing between medication and rent. Companies like GM, Boeing, AT&T, and thousands of others operated under this model. It worked. It created stability. It allowed working-class families to plan, to dream, to know that their sacrifice meant something tangible. Think about what that certainty does to a person's psychology, their decision-making, their entire life trajectory. Frank could buy a house knowing his retirement was secure. He could put his kids through college. He could take that vacation he'd been saving for without the gnawing anxiety that he was jeopardizing his future. His wife could stay home with the children if they chose, or work part-time, because they weren't in a desperate race to accumulate enough in individual retirement accounts to avoid poverty in old age. The pension was like having a guaranteed paycheck that continued even after you stopped working. Imagine that. A world where retirement wasn't a terrifying question mark, but a planned, dignified transition. And here's what's crucial to understand. Under this system, the company bore the risk. If the pension fund's investments underperformed, if there was a recession, if the market crashed, that was management's problem to solve. They had to figure out how to make those pension payments regardless of economic conditions. They had actuaries calculating how much they needed to set aside. They had fiduciary responsibilities. The workers' benefit was protected. Frank didn't need to become a financial expert. Didn't need to understand the difference between growth stocks and bonds. Didn't need to time the market or rebalance his portfolio. He just needed to show up and do his job. The company handled the rest. This arrangement wasn't just economically sound, it was morally coherent. It recognized that the people who built the products, who made the company profitable, who generated the wealth, deserved to share in that prosperity, not just during their working years, but afterward too. It was a form of deferred compensation, but it was real, it was enforceable, and it fundamentally altered the power dynamic between labor and capital. Workers had leverage. They had something valuable that couldn't be easily taken away. And perhaps most importantly, they had dignity. Now I want you to hold that image in your mind. Frank retiring at 65 with his pension checks arriving like clockwork, enjoying his grandchildren, taking that cross-country road trip he always talked about, living out his years with security and peace. Hold that image because I'm about to show you exactly how that world was systematically dismantled. By 1980, 60% of American workers had access to a defined benefit pension. Today, that number has collapsed to less than 15%. That's not a decline. That's an extinction event. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was calculated, deliberate, and sold to the American people as liberation when it was actually dispossession. Understanding what we lost isn't enough. You need to see exactly how they convinced an entire generation to give it up willingly, to believe that trading guaranteed security for market-based gambling was somehow progress. The bastidors of this transformation reveal something darker than simple corporate greed. They expose a coordinated effort to rewrite the rules of American capitalism in favor of financial institutions at the direct expense of working people. If this is hitting you right now, if you're realizing what was taken from your parents' generation and why your own retirement looks so different and so much scarier, write in the comments, "I see it now." The transformation began quietly in the early 1980s, right around the time Ronald Reagan was telling America it was morning again. Corporate boardrooms across the country were having very different conversations than the ones workers were hearing on the factory floor. CFOs were looking at their balance sheets and seeing those pension obligations as liabilities, massive, growing liabilities that cut into quarterly profits and made Wall Street analysts nervous. They needed a way out, but they couldn't just cancel pensions without massive backlash and potential legal nightmares. They needed something more elegant, something that workers might actually accept, maybe even embrace. Enter the financial consultants from firms like McKinsey and the big investment banks, armed with PowerPoint presentations and a revolutionary idea, the 401k. Now here's where the marketing genius comes in, because they didn't sell this as what it actually was, a massive transfer of risk from employers to employees. Instead, they wrapped it in the language of empowerment and freedom. "Why should you depend on your company to manage your retirement?" they asked. "Don't you want control over your own financial destiny? With a 401k, you're in the driver's seat. You decide how to invest. You choose your own path. This is about personal responsibility, about taking charge of your future." It sounded good. It appealed to that deeply American sense of individualism, that belief that we should be masters of our own fate. They made it sound like liberation. It was a trap. The pitch went like this: your employer will contribute a percentage of your salary into your personal retirement account. You can contribute too, and hey, it's tax deferred, which sounds like a great deal. You pick from a menu of investment options, mutual funds, stock funds, bond funds, and watch your nest egg grow. When you retire, you've got this pot of money that's all yours. Freedom, flexibility, the American dream on steroids. What they left out was everything that mattered. Under the old pension system, if the market crashed the year before you retired, that was the company's problem. Your benefit didn't change. You still got your guaranteed monthly check. But with a 401k, if the market tanks when you're 64 and ready to retire, congratulations. You just lost 30% of your retirement savings and there's nobody to bail you out. That's your problem now. All of it. And let's talk about who actually benefited from this transformation. First, there were the companies themselves. They saved absolutely massive amounts of money by switching from defined benefit pensions to 401k contributions. Instead of being on the hook for guaranteed payments until a retiree died, they could just match your contribution up to a certain percentage and wash their hands of any further responsibility. General Electric alone saved billions by making this shift. IBM, Verizon, thousands of companies followed suit. The savings went straight to the bottom line, boosting profits and executive bonuses, while workers took on all the downside risk. But the financial services industry? They saw this transition as the greatest gold rush in modern history. Suddenly, trillions of dollars that used to be managed by pension fund professionals were flowing into individual retirement accounts that needed management, advice, investment products. Mutual fund companies exploded. Financial advisors multiplied like rabbits, and everyone took their cut. Management fees, expense ratios, advisory fees, transaction costs, death by 1,000 cuts, each one skimming a percentage off your retirement savings year after year after year. Studies have shown that over a lifetime, these fees can eat up 30% or more of your total retirement savings. Let that sink in. Nearly a third of the money you're desperately trying to save for your old age goes to paying financial intermediaries who are essentially managing risk that your employer used to manage for free as part of their obligation to you. The consultants who advised companies on making this transition, they got paid enormous fees. The investment banks that created and marketed the 401k products, they built empires. The entire infrastructure of financial planning and wealth management that barely existed before the 1980s, it became a multi-trillion-dollar industry, all built on the backs of workers who were told they were gaining freedom when they were actually being stripped of security. This wasn't evolution. This was a calculated heist dressed up as progress. And here's the truly insidious part. They made you feel responsible for your own failure. If your 401k underperforms, if you retire during a downturn, if you didn't contribute enough or picked the wrong funds, that's framed as your personal failure, your lack of financial literacy, your poor planning. The system that transferred all the risk onto you while enriching everyone else gets to walk away blameless while you're working at Walmart at 75 because your retirement account didn't quite make it. The mentality shift they engineered was profound. From collective security to individual responsibility, from guaranteed outcomes to hopeful gambling, from dignity in retirement being a right earned through decades of labor, to it being a privilege only the financially savvy could achieve. The real revelation here isn't just that they changed the retirement system. It's that they changed how we think about economic security itself, convincing an entire society that precarity was actually empowerment, that shouldering all the risk was somehow freedom. And the corporations and Wall Street firms that orchestrated this transformation, they're richer than ever, while retirement insecurity has become a defining feature of American life for anyone who isn't in the top 10%. Drop a comment if you're starting to connect these dots. This was engineered. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Because even the pension funds that survived, the ones for teachers, firefighters, police officers, municipal workers, didn't escape Wall Street's appetite for extraction. In fact, they became the perfect marks for a scheme so brazen that when you understand how it works, you'll wonder how it's even legal. What happened to these remaining pension funds reveals the pure predatory nature of modern finance and how your retirement, even when it's supposedly protected, can become someone else's exit strategy. Here's the setup. Pension funds have obligations. They've promised specific benefits to retirees, which means they need to generate returns to meet those obligations. Back in the 70s and 80s, they could park money in safe government bonds paying 5, 6, 7% and call it a day. But then interest rates dropped, regulations changed, and fund managers found themselves in a bind. They needed higher returns to meet their commitments, but the safe investments weren't cutting it anymore. Wall Street, always ready to exploit desperation, had a solution: riskier assets that promised higher yields. Junk bonds, complex derivatives, mortgage-backed securities, private equity deals, financial products that came with big promises and even bigger risks. And pension fund managers, under pressure to hit their numbers, started buying. Now let me explain what's really happening here using a term you need to understand: exit liquidity. In trading, exit liquidity means someone who buys an asset when the smart money is selling. You're providing liquidity so the insiders can exit their positions before everything crashes. Think of it like this. Imagine you're at a casino and you notice all the professional gamblers quietly cashing out their chips and heading for the door. Then the house starts aggressively recruiting new players, offering free drinks and promising big wins. If you sit down at that table right then, you're the exit liquidity. You're the sucker buying in at the top, while the professionals who know something you don't are getting out. That's exactly what pension funds became for Wall Street. Exit liquidity. Investment banks would create complex financial products. Let's say a bundle of subprime mortgages repackaged as AAA-rated securities. They'd get their ratings agency friends to stamp them as safe. They'd market them aggressively, and then they'd sell them to pension funds right before the whole thing collapsed. The insiders knew these products were garbage. They had the models, the data, the inside information. But pension funds, operating under regulatory requirements and pressure to generate returns, were legally almost obligated to buy these safe, high-yield investments. They became the bag holders, exit liquidity for Wall Street's toxic assets. Look at what happened with CalPERS, the California Public Employees Retirement System, one of the largest pension funds in the country. In the years leading up to 2008, they loaded up on mortgage-backed securities and real estate investments, chasing the yields they needed to meet their obligations. Wall Street firms were more than happy to sell them these products, knowing full well that the housing market was a bubble ready to pop. When it did, CalPERS lost billions. The retirees who'd worked their entire careers believing their pensions were secure suddenly found their fund underwater, leading to benefit cuts and increased contribution requirements. The people who sold them those toxic assets, they'd already cashed out and moved on to the next scheme. They got out. The teachers and state workers. Exit liquidity. Or look at Detroit's pension funds. In the years before the city's bankruptcy, Wall Street banks sold the pension system complex interest rate swaps and derivatives, promising they'd protect the fund and generate extra returns. Instead, these deals cost the pension system hundreds of millions in additional fees and penalties, accelerating the city's financial collapse. When Detroit declared bankruptcy, retirees saw their benefits slashed, while the banks that had sold them these disastrous products claimed priority status as creditors and got paid first. The people who'd served their city for decades as teachers, sanitation workers, civil servants, they got pennies on the dollar while Wall Street protected its own. Exit liquidity. Again. This pattern repeated across the country. Pension funds in Rhode Island, New Jersey, Illinois, Kentucky, all targeted with the same playbook. Sell them risky products when the market's hot, collect your fees, and exit before the collapse. When everything blows up, the pension fund takes the loss, retirees take the benefit cuts, and the financial institutions that engineered the disaster face minimal consequences. Maybe they pay a settlement that's a fraction of what they made. Maybe they promise to be better next time. But the fundamental dynamic never changes. The 2008 financial crisis was the masterclass in this model. Wall Street created an entire ecosystem of toxic mortgage products, got them rated as safe by captured ratings agencies, sold them to pension funds and institutional investors worldwide, and then bet against them on the other side through credit default swaps. Read that again. They literally built the bomb, sold it to pension funds as a safe investment, and then took out insurance betting the bomb would explode. When it did, the banks got bailouts while pension funds lost trillions, and retirees paid the price through reduced benefits and delayed retirement. Wall Street walked away whole. Working people lost everything they'd saved for decades to build. What makes this even more insidious is the language used to describe these disasters. When a pension fund loses billions because Wall Street sold them junk, the media narrative focuses on underfunded pensions and overly generous benefits, rather than the systematic looting that actually occurred. The revelation that gets buried is that these pension funds were deliberately targeted, exploited as exit liquidity for financial products the sellers knew were time bombs. The impact wasn't accidental. It was the business model. Write exit liquidity in the comments if you're seeing how this game really works. So what does all of this actually look like on the ground, in the lives of real people who played by the rules and got crushed anyway? Let's put some faces and numbers to this devastation, because these aren't just abstract economic theories. They're millions of individual tragedies playing out in real time across America. Walk into any Walmart, any Home Depot, any fast food restaurant, and you'll see them. People in their 70s and 80s wearing name tags and company vests, standing for 8-hour shifts because their retirement savings didn't make it. These aren't people who failed to plan or lived irresponsibly. These are people who worked their entire lives, who saved what they could in their 401ks, who did everything the financial advisors told them to do, and it still wasn't enough. The numbers tell a brutal story. According to recent data, nearly half of Americans aged 55 and older have nothing saved for retirement. Zero. And among those who do have 401k accounts, the median balance for people approaching retirement age is around $65,000. Think about that for a second. $65,000 to fund potentially 20 or 30 years of life after you stop working. That's not a retirement fund. That's a couple years of basic expenses if you're lucky, and nothing goes wrong. Compare that to the pension system, where someone like Frank from our earlier example would have received a guaranteed monthly check of maybe $3,000 for life. Over 20 years, that's $720,000 in total benefits, and he never had to worry about market crashes or running out of money before he died. The quality of life difference is staggering. Retirees with traditional pensions report significantly lower levels of financial stress and anxiety. They can afford their medications, they can help their grandchildren, they can actually enjoy the retirement they spent 40 years earning. Meanwhile, people dependent on 401k savings are making impossible calculations. Do I take that vacation I've dreamed about, or do I preserve my savings in case I live another 10 years? Do I help my daughter with her medical bills, or do I protect my own future? Do I eat well, or do I make this money stretch? These are decisions that people with pensions rarely had to make because the monthly check kept coming regardless of their spending decisions. And the poverty statistics among seniors are climbing for the first time in decades. After years of decline, elderly poverty is rising again, directly correlated with the disappearance of pension coverage. More seniors are facing food insecurity, housing instability, and medical debt than at any point since the 1960s. The transformation from guaranteed pensions to market-based retirement gambling has created a generation of elderly Americans who are one health crisis, one market downturn, one unexpected expense away from complete financial ruin. This isn't the golden years they were promised. This is survival mode at an age when they should be resting. But here's what makes this even harder to accept. It didn't have to be this way. The money was always there. The productivity was always there. American workers in the last 40 years have been more productive than any generation in history. The wealth they created didn't vanish. It just went somewhere else. Now let me show you exactly where it went, because while millions of workers saw their retirement security evaporate, someone got very, very rich. The CEOs who led the charge in eliminating pension plans, they made out like bandits. Take Jack Welch at General Electric, celebrated as a management genius for cutting costs and boosting profits. Part of his strategy involved freezing pension benefits for new employees and shifting to 401k plans. GE saved billions. Welch's compensation during his tenure exceeded $400 million, and his own retirement package included a pension so generous it became a public scandal when details leaked. Let that sink in. While he was destroying pension security for rank-and-file workers, he was securing his own golden parachute. One set of rules for them, another set of rules for everyone else. Or look at the financial services industry executives who built empires on the back of the 401k revolution. Charles Schwab, John Bogle, the leadership at Fidelity and Vanguard. They became billionaires by managing the retirement savings that used to be handled by pension funds at a fraction of the cost. The mutual fund industry went from managing about $50 billion in 1980 to over $20 trillion today. Every dollar of that is someone's retirement savings, and every year, management fees siphon off tens of billions. The wealth didn't disappear. It just changed hands, flowing upward to financial elites while workers bore all the risk and ate all the losses. The consulting firms that advised companies on how to transition away from pensions made fortunes. McKinsey alone earned hundreds of millions advising corporations on pension termination strategies and 401k implementation. They literally got paid to help companies figure out how to shed their obligations to workers while making it sound like progress. The investment banks that sold toxic products to pension funds, that created the complex derivatives that blew up portfolios, that bet against the very products they were selling. They paid fines that amounted to parking tickets compared to their profits and moved on to the next scheme. Understanding the human cost and the obscene enrichment of those who engineered this disaster is crucial. But we also need to confront what this means for the future, for anyone who's still working, still hoping their 401k will somehow be enough. The mentality shift that's occurred is profound. An entire society has been trained to accept that retirement insecurity is normal, that working into your 70s is just how it is now, that dying with dignity is a luxury rather than a right earned through decades of labor. The truth behind the curtain reveals that this wasn't inevitable. It was engineered by people who profited immensely while convincing you it was all for your own good. Type, "They got rich, we got robbed," if this reality is hitting you right now. The reason I'm telling you all of this right now, the reason this matters urgently in this moment, is because the exact same playbook is being run again as we speak. The architects of the pension destruction didn't retire after their success. They just moved on to the next target. That target is Social Security. If you think what happened to private pensions was bad, what they're planning for Social Security will make that look like a warm-up act. The same language, the same tactics, the same lies wrapped in the rhetoric of personal responsibility and free market efficiency. It's all being deployed right now, and most people don't even realize they're watching a rerun of a disaster they've already lived through. Right now, there are think tanks funded by Wall Street and billionaire libertarians publishing white papers about how Social Security is unsustainable, how it needs to be reformed, how younger generations would be better off with personal retirement accounts that they control. Sound familiar? It's the exact same pitch they used to sell the 401k. They're telling you that letting you invest your Social Security contributions in the stock market is empowerment, that it's modernizing an outdated system, that you'll end up with more money if you just trust the market. What they're not telling you is what this transformation would actually mean. It would represent the largest transfer of risk in American history. It would be the biggest windfall for financial services companies ever recorded. Trillions of dollars in Social Security contributions would flow into Wall Street's management, generating fees forever. And you? You would shoulder all the market risk that's currently absorbed by the government's guaranteed benefit structure. The propaganda campaign is already well underway. You hear politicians talking about Social Security going bankrupt, about how we need to raise the retirement age, about means testing, about private accounts as a solution. Every single one of these talking points serves the same agenda: dismantling the last major pillar of retirement security in America and converting it into another profit center for financial elites. They're manufacturing a crisis. They're doing it to justify a solution that benefits them at your expense. And they're counting on the fact that most people don't understand how Social Security actually works or remember what happened when we privatized pensions. Here's the truth they don't want you to grasp. Social Security isn't going bankrupt. Let me say that again. Social Security is not going bankrupt. It's fully funded for decades. The shortfalls they keep screaming about could be fixed with minor tweaks, like raising the cap on taxable income. But fixing it doesn't serve the agenda. Destroying it and replacing it with private accounts does, because that creates a massive new revenue stream for Wall Street while eliminating a government program that actually works. The transformation they're pushing would be catastrophic for working people. It would be incredibly lucrative for the financial industry. And that's exactly why they're pushing it so hard. This pattern isn't limited to retirement. Look at what's happening with healthcare. Medicare for all gets shouted down, while private insurance companies and pharmaceutical giants rake in record profits. Student loan debt has turned education into a lifetime financial burden, while loan servicers and banks profit. Housing costs have exploded while private equity firms buy up single-family homes and convert them into rental income streams. Every single system that used to provide some degree of security or public good is being systematically privatized, financialized, and turned into an extraction mechanism. The pattern is identical across sectors. Take something that worked for the public, claim it's broken or inefficient, propose a market-based solution, and watch wealth flow upward while risk flows downward. The mentality they've cultivated is that this is just how things are, that there's no alternative, that we should be grateful for whatever scraps we get. But that's a lie. It's designed to make you accept your own exploitation. The decisions being made right now in corporate boardrooms and congressional offices are determining whether your kids and grandkids will have any hope of a dignified retirement, or whether they'll be working until they die. This isn't abstract future stuff. This is happening now. The window to stop it is closing. So what can you actually do about this? First, knowledge is power. And now you have knowledge that most people don't. You understand the mechanics of how your parents' and grandparents' retirement security was stolen. You see the playbook. You recognize the language they use to sell exploitation as empowerment. That awareness alone changes the game because you can't be fooled the same way. You can spot the con when they run it again. Second, you talk about it. You share this information with people in your life who don't know the history. You push back when politicians claim that gutting public programs is somehow in your interest. You demand accountability from anyone proposing to dismantle what little security remains. The revelation that matters most is this: none of what happened to pensions, none of what's being planned for Social Security, none of the wealth extraction we've documented here is inevitable or natural. These are deliberate choices made by people with names and addresses, people who profit while you struggle. And choices can be opposed. Choices can be resisted. Choices can be reversed if enough people understand what's actually happening and decide they're not going to accept it anymore. The impact you can have starts with refusing to believe the lies they're selling and helping others see through them too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject one last time, because there's a final piece to this puzzle that ties everything together and shows you exactly why they keep getting away with it. Drop "I see the pattern now" in the comments if this is all connecting for you. If you made it all the way here, you're not just watching content, you're equipping yourself with a lens to see how power actually operates in this country. That matters more than you might realize. Most people go their entire lives never understanding why they're struggling, why their parents had more security with less education, why the promise of the American dream feels like it's slipping further away no matter how hard they work. Now you know. You've got the context, the history, the mechanics of the con. That's not something to take lightly. If this kind of deep dive into the architecture of how the game is rigged is valuable to you, hit that subscribe button. I'm here every week pulling back the curtain on another scheme, another mechanism of wealth extraction, another piece of the puzzle that they'd prefer you never see. This channel exists because I believe understanding the system is the first step to not being crushed by it, and your subscription tells me you're on that same journey. And look, if you're still here, if this resonated, if something clicked into place while you were watching, do me a favor. Leave a comment that just says, "I made it to the end." That's it. Simple. But it tells me you're paying attention. It tells me this work matters. And it helps more people find content like this instead of whatever algorithm-friendly garbage usually gets pushed to the top. Your engagement literally determines whether these revelations reach 10,000 people or 10 million. Drop a like on this video too, because that small gesture actually carries weight in how widely this information spreads. I know it sounds trivial, but the algorithm rewards engagement, and every like increases the chance that someone who desperately needs to hear this will actually see it in their feed. And here's the thing. We've covered a lot of ground today, but this is just one thread in a much larger tapestry. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how Wall Street operates like organized crime, breaking down specific schemes and showing you the patterns you need to recognize. Click on that next. Keep this momentum going. The more you understand, the harder you are to manipulate. And honestly, that's what terrifies them. An informed public is the one thing their entire system cannot survive. I'll see you in the next one.